Way, there's a lot of politicians out there that do invest in Bitcoin and they're big fans of it. These are the politicians that know that they're running up the debt. They know the future of the dollar, and they're big fans of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So they're not going to be looking to ban it. And I think you're going to see that the regulation, whether it's a positive or a neutral or a negative, it's still going to allow for the existence of crypto, just with some rules to follow. Yeah, so a lot of this has to do with the dollar, right? So when you see the dollar continuing to stay at 20 plus year highs and it continues to grind up, it just kills all risk assets. And you can actually watch on an intraday basis how every uptick in the dollar, you'll see the opposite occurring in the Bitcoin chart or in the stock charts of the S&P as well. So a lot has to do with the dollar. We have to keep an eye on rates. Remember, as interest rates rise, there are going to be a certain amount of investors that say, hey, listen, I could get kind of a risk-free return of 5% or 4%. Why am I risking my money in Bitcoin or in the stock market when I could lose 20 or 30%? So there's this give and take going on in the market as the market tries to gauge what the heck the Federal Reserve is going to do in this coming meeting. Are they going to raise 75? Is it going to be 50? Is it going to be 100? And again, the market is just trying to figure out the levels. We have Bitcoin that flushed early today with the stock market. The stock market was down sharply this morning. It reversed because the dollar began to pull back. And amazingly, I mean, gold was down this morning and then gold reversed basically flat on the day as the dollar came in. And you can see Bitcoin rallying up as well. So the key for me is continuing to watch this 19,500 level on a daily closing basis. The reason why that's such an important level to me is if you go all the way back to the 2017 high, that is the high pivot. And that's kind of the level we've been dancing around for a long, long time. So as long as we kind of hover around that level, there's a small chance that Bitcoin can get some sort of bid if the dollar comes in, if the Fed gives some sort of dovish speak on Wednesday that maybe shows a pivot coming for interest rates. So here it is, and what you could see is basically they're following almost in tune with each other. And I think this is so remarkable because, you know, gold, we've grown up, you know, for the past 20, 40, 60 years that gold was a safety play when things got scary in risk assets. But we can clearly see that's not the case here with gold and the S&P both dipping as Bitcoin has also dipped. And again, the charts are very, very similar in terms of their price action. And again, the key here is understanding that it's the dollar that is causing the movement in both gold as well as risk assets like the stock market and cryptocurrency. Yeah, so I think gold has been doing amazingly well. Number one, if any investor out there was fully in gold, they would be thrilled this year, right? I mean, they would be so happy to only be down 5% or so on the year. And the other thing to remember is the gold chart is only down 5, give or take a percent, but the dollar has gone up 15% on the year. So if someone told me that the dollar was going to rise 15%, I would say, oh, well, gold probably should be down 15% on the year at least. And the fact is it's only down 5%, which shows to me it's relatively outperforming what it should be doing. And it tells me to also that you likely are having smart money accumulating, which is why it's not down as much. So I continue to be a huge bull on gold. I think, again, you know, people love to hate on gold, but in reality, it's performed well. I mean, take a look at the euro chart, the gold euro chart, or the gold yen chart. It's an awesome, if you were in those assets via those currencies, you'd be loving gold even more this year. But I think, again, the fact that gold is holding up as well as it is with such a strong dollar is a testament that it's getting ready for a big bull run. So I think Bitcoin still has another leg lower to 12 to 13,000. I think the stock market likely by end of year or early 2023 will tag the March 2020, well, the highs just before the March 2020 COVID collapse. So you're talking about the S&P downside to like 3,400 or so. The key for gold's outperformance is going to be when you hear the Fed pivot. The Fed pivot is going to be key because inflation's not going to be down to 2% or under, and it's going to tell you that the Fed is now more worried about the economy than about inflation. Yeah, so that's such a great one to look at. And again, we had this major, ridiculously hawkish comments from Jackson Hole, from Jerome Powell just a few weeks ago, and still we've seen these hawkish comments that were kind of, you could argue that they were more hawkish than any comments we had ever heard from the Federal Reserve. We know it spooked the stock market. The stock market declined dramatically. And when I say they're calling the bluff, is that the bond market is made up of the smartest money in the world, right? It's the biggest market. It's the smartest money. And what you can see on this chart of the 10-year yield is that the 10-year is just back to where it was in June. And so what that tells you is that the bond market says, hey, listen, we don't think the Fed is any more hawkish than they were in June at these levels, even in spite of Jerome Powell's ridiculously hawkish commentary just at the Jackson Hole meeting here. So again, for me, that's telling me something. The bond market doesn't believe the Federal Reserve is going to hike rates that much more. I think, again, 75 basis points is probably what you're going to get on Wednesday. And then I think the Fed very possibly could be on hold after that. The dollar's getting ready for a reversal. So again, that would coincide with the potential of a pivot coming up here. And again, I don't want anyone to misconstrue what I'm saying. They're still going to raise 75 basis points on Wednesday. It's about what the commentary is. That's what what's going to move the markets on Wednesday, is what Jerome Powell says in his press conference. So if he even opens the door to kind of a pivot, the market is going to rejoice, the dollar's going to fall. And I do think that you have the midterms coming up, and the Fed likely will sit on the sidelines through the midterms and then reevaluate. So for the last year plus, I've been really a proponent of regulation. And the reason I am is that as much as we like the deregulation and kind of this independent currency type thing, if you ever expect big money to come in, and I'm talking about pension funds with trillions of dollars, I mean, just them putting 1% of their assets in Bitcoin would be massively positive for the price of Bitcoin. So I'm coming from the investor standpoint, where I want to see the price go up. And the only way you're going to get that is if you get a framework of regulation and people actually know the rules, right? So one of the things in the stock market that I've learned over the years of trading is that the market doesn't necessarily care if it's a positive or a negative. They just don't like not knowing, right? They don't like that ability to not figure out what the rules are. So by getting regulation out there, you create a framework where these institutions can say, okay, now we can play in this field. We can play ball because we know the rules and we feel comfortable investing with our fiduciary responsibility other people's money. So I welcome regulation. I think it's needed. You saw over the last 6 months bankruptcies and shady activities and all this. And investors honestly are scared of crypto in many situations. So I think you have to get this regulation. By the way, there's a lot of politicians out there that do invest in Bitcoin and they're big fans of it. These are the politicians that know that they're running up the debt. They know the future of the dollar, and they're big fans of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So they're not going to be looking to ban it. And I think you're going to see that the regulation, whether it's a positive or a neutral or a negative, it's still going to allow for the existence of crypto, just with some rules to follow. Ethereum, right? So you have to look at it as the rally from the lows in June. It was about 100+%. And a lot of that was expectation of this merge coming. And really what we see, and we see this with so many stocks as well, is that people buy into these stocks on anticipation of great earnings, and then they report great earnings, and then people are like, okay, well, what's my next reason to own this? I'm up X amount of dollars. Let's sell it. Let's take profits. We'll revisit this in the future. And I think that's what's going on with Ethereum. As much as I love the merge, and I think what it will end up doing will be a positive for Ethereum, it still doesn't solve the immediate issue of the risk and the fear of crypto right now, with the Fed being so aggressive. So you're going to see it come down here. I have a major technical level on my chart around $1,250. You can see it just kissed that level right down here, coming from this pivot. If it gets through there, you could retest sub 1,000. But ultimately, again, you get down sub 1,000, and I think you start accumulating this for the long term very slowly, because it could go lower. But again, you have to think about the thesis with the merge in the long term, but then understand that fear rules the day in the near term, and that's what we're dealing with the Fed right now in the strong dollar. In terms of the chart, Solana's still holding its $26 low down here, so that's still okay. It looks like it's kind of creating some sort of base right now. So you want to see it hold 26. If it holds 26, I think you could easily trade back up as high as $60. But I do caution that for us to get up to $60, we need to see a Fed pivot and we need to see the dollar start to pull back. So, I mean, that really is the ruling factor. And then long-term Solana, just keep in mind that it's new technology. You have to always be a little careful that something newer and better doesn't supplant it. And I think that's just the one concern. So for me, just to be clear, when I'm looking at what I'm holding long-term in terms of crypto, I'm mainly focusing on Bitcoin with a little bit of Ethereum, but I'm still not willing to commit long-term holds to Solana, Avalanche, and some of these others yet.